Welcome back guys to another video. I'm quite excited. Today we're going to be testing out this new product. It's a RUDOLF optics scope. It's a 2.5 to 15 by 50 with a T3 reticle. It's going to be going onto my AR. It's going to be replacing this 124 power by 26 scope that I have on here. It's a very nice little scope for shooting close range, but what I'm wanting to do is test this rifle's capabilities and stretch it out a bit further. But basically what I'm going to be doing today is doing an unboxing video and another one, well, all in the same video, showing you guys how to mount new optics to your precision rifle. But before we get started, just do a safety check on the rifle, make sure the rifle is not loaded. So we've removed the magazine, pull the bolt open, make sure it's open there, leave it open, and clear. Pop that back in there, nice and snug. So inside the box, what we have in here is a sunshade. We have the optics, and then for you guys who like to do a bit of reading, a little manual. So wait for any of that, toss that one side, get to the important bits. So this little scope that I've chosen is a 2.5 to 15 by 50. It's got tactical turrets, which is quite nice. So to use the tactical turrets, you pull it up and then you can turn it. It's got nice audible clicks. I will be doing a full-on review on this scope once after I've mounted it here and I've tested it a bit and shot it a couple times and see how it performs out in the field. Then I'll give it a full review and what I think on the scope. Now what I'm going to be doing, I'm going to be setting this one side. I'm going to be showing you guys quickly on how to mount the optics. So we're going to be removing this current scope that we have on here and fitting the new scope. So just take off the cap so we can get to the screws. What I like to use, I've just got a little socket wrench over here just to make it a bit easier to loosen and tighten. For my tightening up on the scope, I like to use what's called a fat wrench. Now what that basically does is it will give an indication as to how many foot-pounds that you'll be tightening the scope up to. It's very important that when you tighten your optics, either your scope rings or the base to the rifle, that you tighten it up to the correct torque settings so that you don't twist the scope around and bend the scope and break it. So I'm just going to remove these caps quickly. Very important when you're mounting optics or some form of optic to the rifle or any precision rifle that you use the correct mounts for the purpose that you're using. As you see here, the frame for the AR basically ends over there. So like now, if we wanted that scope to mount where it was, we would be mounting one half of the optic on the rail and the other half onto the receiver, which isn't very good for balancing the scope, so you're going to get a bit of movement. So you would like to get all your non-moving parts on one side. That's why we go for an offset mount like this on an AR, just to help stabilize the rifle or the optics a lot better on the rifle. Now with regards to setting up RUDOLF, this scope has a 3.8 inch RUDOLF on it, which is pretty similar to the other scope which had a 4 inch. So I know the scope needs to line up with just slightly ahead of the charging handle on the AR to get the correct RUDOLF. So I'll put that on there. Also guys, very important, when mounting your scope rings or any screws on a rifle that you're going to be holding your optics down, it's very important that you just use a little bit of Loctite. I would recommend using like a non-permanent Loctite on here so that you can, if you ever decide to replace optics or change them or do something or remove it, that you can still get them off again. Okay, so I'm gonna fast forward the video a little bit just so you guys can see what the process is. I'm just gonna do all these screws and then I'll show you how I torque up the screws and get the scope leveled and make sure the RUDOLF is set perfectly to the rifle. So I'm just going to show you how I mount up this. This technique that I'm going to show you, you don't particularly need any spirit levels or anything like that. So it's quite easy, quite straightforward. What I do is just lock up these rings slightly so that you're still able to move the scope in and out, back and forth like that, just so that you can fine tune it to fit your eye properly. Now what I do, generally the scope mounts are level to your base of the rifle. So what I normally do is take like a hex Allen key or something like that. I shove it underneath the scope, get one that just fits, that is just tight enough to fit between your scope and the base. That generally gives you a pretty good indication of level from your scope to the rifle. What I find is I don't particularly like to put my level on top here, on top of the adjustment, your elevation, as sometimes you may have variance in your scope caps that it might be slightly off and skew. Then it's just going to throw everything out. So this way I like to do it. The rifle's in here nice and tight. I put my hex key inside here and just move it around until it's touching on both sides, and it moves freely inside there. It's just not blocking it down. Then what I do is I move over to my fat wrench. Now this fat wrench, when you're doing your scope rings on here, you don't really want to tighten it more than 25 inch-pounds. That seems to be a pretty good happy medium for setting your top rings. You don't want it too much because generally these rings are aluminium, your scope's aluminium. If you torque it too much, you're going to either put excessive pressure on your scope or damage your rings or the scope. You don't really want to do that, especially when you've got a new optic. Now I'm also a little bit anal with this. I like to have exactly the same spacings on both sides of the rings. So I don't like to have one side tighten more than the other. I like it to be pretty even. So what I'll do is just lock it up slightly, check level there underneath with my Allen key, tighten it up a bit more, still good. So these particular rings that I have on here have four screws, so it's 2 this side and 2 on this side. What I'll do is when you tighten them up, especially if you've got more than just one on either end, is to tighten it up in a cross formation, just so that you know when you're locking it up, you're not putting too much pressure on one side more than the other side. I'm just going to tighten that up. You'll hear that click. As soon as you hear that click, you know you've reached your 20 inch-pound. So what I'm going to do is I'm just tightening up at the moment on 20, just getting everything snugged up at 20 inch-pound. Once I've snugged everything up to 20, I will move it up to a 25 inch-pound. I'm just going to go around, tighten everything, make sure it's all good. Now also, very important, on these top rings, when you're using and you're tightening your scope on them, I prefer to use a removable Loctite. So if you do decide to change scopes like I've just done now, you'll be able to get them off. With the bases, I generally tend to use a more permanent Loctite because you don't really want that base to come loose while you're busy shooting. It has happened to me on a number of occasions. Just gone past, we were busy hunting and I had the scope actually come loose on the rifle while I was busy hunting, but luckily it didn't affect the hunt too much. So there, see, now we're at 25 inch-pounds. I'll just go over everything, check it's all tight, and double check all my torque settings that I'm doing. Okay, so now we've got that all set up. You can remove my little hex there. Bring your fat wrench back to 0 so that you don't damage the spring inside there. So that's how we have set up the scope. Just going to do a quick test fit to see how it fits to me. Well, it's pretty nice with this scope. When you buy it, it comes with these pop-up scope mounts already, so it's not an added extra that you have to buy. Yeah, that fits very nicely into my eye relief. That's perfect. So now what I need to do now is take this rifle out to the shooting range, put a couple rounds on the target down at 100 meters, set up my scope, zero it out. And if you guys liked the video and enjoyed what I did, or if you have any questions or comments on how I mounted my optics and you would like a little bit more information on how I do it, please don't forget to put a comment down below and like and subscribe to our channel.